Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is burning up the Steam charts and reviewing really positively. It's also currently marked as Steam Deck playable, not verified, on the game's store page. So naturally, the next question is, how does it actually run on Steam Deck? I've tested a few different modes and have the skinny on the performance of KCD2 on the little handheld that could. Before we get started, this is not an in-depth technical review of all the ins and outs of Steam Deck performance. More of a vibe check on what you can expect from Henry's massive adventure in portable form. I tested these modes on a launch Steam Deck, not an OLED, so if you have a slightly stronger OLED, some of your findings may be a bit different. Also, please excuse my aiming. I was trying to peek around the side of a camera while shooting off-screen gameplay and using a USB controller, while not causing a reflection with my giant head. On low settings across the board, I was getting between 32 and 40 FPS most of the time, very rarely dipping into the 20s, which seems like a totally acceptable way to play if you don't mind some gnarly looking distant foliage and some pop-in, especially when moving quickly on a horse. You can see the low fidelity LODs being replaced along this line as you travel, so if that bugs you, I would consider other options. I would not, however, recommend playing on medium settings without any kind of resolution scaling. I thought it might be okay during the first siege section other than one drop to about 22 FPS when some explosion effects went off, but once you get past the intro into the first horse riding section, the frame rate lives in the low to mid 20 FPS range, and I even saw it dip into the teens. So next, I tried medium settings with FSR on performance mode. Medium on FSR performance mode fared much better, with frame rates sticking in the 30s and sometimes even into the 40s. The lowest it got in the intro section was in the short shot under the horse's hooves, where it briefly dipped into the low 20s. This wasn't the norm for the rest of the performance in this mode, but as a warning, it could be indicative of issues in graphically intense areas later on. It also warns you when switching on FSR performance mode that it can reduce the readability of text, and they weren't kidding. Blurriness and dancing artifacts definitely shows up in the menus when FSR performance is turned on, and I could definitely see it bothering some people, given how much time you spend in the menus in KCD2. Your mileage may vary. Jumping into every minute option on both the game and system levels are beyond the scope of this video, but a few things you can try if a highly inconsistent frame rate bothers you more than a steady low one like me, is to force the game to max at 30 FPS on either low settings or medium with FSR, or forcing 40 Hz in the Steam Deck system settings, which is actually my preferred way of playing a lot of AAA games on Valve's handheld. All in all, it's nice to have options, and while you will always have trade-offs, try a few of these tweaks to see what you like. Much of KCD2's gameplay is pretty slow, with lots of walking, talking, and engaging with subsystems, so it's not like a super high frame rate is always necessary. And that's the quick lowdown of how Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 runs on Steam Deck. For more on Kingdom Come, you can check out any one of our numerous guide videos on IGN.com or our YouTube, and for everything else gaming,